Imagine you're sitting at a kitchen table, bills spread out in front of you. You know you owe money, you just don't know how much. And every time you try to add it up, the number changes before you finish counting. That's America right now. As of early 2026, the United States owes somewhere in the neighborhood of $39 trillion. Not billion, trillion. And if that number doesn't immediately make your stomach drop, that's actually part of the problem, because our brains simply aren't built to feel the weight of it. So let's try something different. Let's make it real. If you started counting to 36 trillion, just counting one number per second, you would finish in over 1.1 million years. The pyramids would be built and crumble to dust thousands of times over before you reach the end. And the number would still be growing while you counted. This isn't a story about politics or about who's to blame. It's a story about a number so large it has quietly reshaped what your country can and cannot do. It's a story about what your future and your children's future might look like because of it. Let's start at the beginning. For most of the 20th century, America kept its debt relatively contained. Economists compare debt to the size of the whole economy, the debt to GDP ratio. Think of it like your personal debt compared to your income. If you owe $20,000 but earn $100,000 a year, that's very different from owing it on a $20,000 salary. For most of the 1900s, America's debt to GDP ratio stayed below 40%, responsible even by today's standards. Then came World War II. Building the greatest military machine in human history costs money, enormous, staggering amounts of it. By 1946, the US debt to GDP ratio had surged to roughly 106%. But here's the remarkable thing. America paid it down. Slowly, steadily over the next 3 decades, the ratio shrank. The economy expanded faster than the debt accumulated, and the burden became manageable. That playbook worked. Until it didn't. When Ronald Reagan took office in 1981, the national debt stood at about $1 trillion, a number that, at the time, felt unthinkable. By 1986, it had doubled to $2 trillion. That moment matters because it was the first time the country began borrowing not to fight a war, but as a matter of policy, a bet that growth would eventually catch up. It hasn't fully caught up since. The debt crossed $10 trillion for the first time in September of 2008. The financial system was collapsing, banks were failing, and the government borrowed massively to stop the bleeding. In the 8 years that followed, the debt roughly doubled again, from 10 trillion to nearly 20 trillion, and then in 2020, something happened that made even that look small. COVID hit. Almost overnight, the government had to replace the income of tens of millions of people who couldn't work. Businesses shuttered, hospitals strained. In the span of roughly 2 years, about $5 trillion was added to the national debt, more than the entire debt of the country as recently as the mid-1990s. $5 trillion in 2 years. Let that land for a moment. So, where does that leave us today? The total national debt sits at roughly $39 trillion, but that headline number actually contains two very different things, and understanding the difference matters. About 7 to 8 trillion of that total is what's called intragovernmental debt, money the government owes to itself. Think of it like borrowing from your own savings account to pay your bills. The Social Security Trust Fund, for example, holds about 2.8 trillion in special government bonds. That's real money owed, but it's owed between government accounts, not to outside lenders. The number that economists watch most closely is the debt held by the public, money owed to actual outside lenders. That figure is now approaching 100% of the entire US economy's annual output. In other words, the country owes the outside world roughly as much as it produces in an entire year. So, who exactly holds that debt? Who is America borrowing from? The answer is more complicated than most people think. The largest single holder is actually the Federal Reserve, the the US central bank, which holds around 4 to 5 trillion in treasury securities. Quantitative easing is the mechanism at work here. The central bank creates money and uses it to buy government debt, which keeps interest rates lower and the economy moving. Foreign governments and investors hold about 8 to 9 trillion. Japan sits at the top of that list with roughly 1.1 trillion. China holds somewhere between 760 billion and 800 billion, notably down from a peak of 1.3 trillion back in 2013. And then there's the rest. American pension funds, insurance companies, and ordinary investors, people like you through your retirement accounts, holding the remainder. The world keeps lending to America because so far it believes America will pay it back. The moment that belief wavers, the moment confidence cracks, the cost of borrowing goes up fast, and that cost is already enormous. Interest on the national debt crossed $1 trillion a year for the first time in fiscal year 2024. $1 trillion, not paying down the debt, not investing in schools or hospitals, just keeping current. Put another way, the US government is spending over $2.7 billion every single day just in interest. That's more than the annual budget of many countries, spent before a single road is paved or a single veteran receives care. And interest doesn't stay flat. When rates rise, as they have sharply in recent years, the cost of servicing debt rises with it. The more you owe and the higher the rates, the more you must borrow just to pay the interest, which increases the debt, which increases the interest bill. It's a spiral. The Congressional Budget Office projects that debt held by the public could reach 118% of GDP by 2035, and that's before accounting for any new major legislation. A massive spending and tax bill currently making its way through Congress could add an estimated $3.3 trillion to the national debt over the next 10 years. The cycle, it seems, is not slowing down. But the headline debt number, even 39 trillion, may actually understate the true picture, because there's another category of obligation that doesn't appear on the official ledger: unfunded liabilities. Unfunded liabilities are promises the government has made, primarily through Social Security and Medicare, that it doesn't currently have the money to keep. Think of it like a pension promise written in ink, with no money set aside to honor it. Social Security alone carries an unfunded obligation estimated at over $23 trillion in present value, meaning that's how much, in today's money, the program is expected to pay out beyond what it will collect. Add Medicare, and some actuarial estimates put the total unfunded obligation above $100 trillion. The official debt of 39 trillion suddenly looks like the tip of the iceberg. So, what does any of this mean for you? Sitting at your kitchen table, trying to make the numbers mean something. Here's one way to feel it. Every person in America carries roughly $100,000 of that national debt as their share. If you're a working taxpayer, your personal share is closer to $250,000. You didn't sign a loan document. But you're on the hook, and your children will be too. The debt shapes your life in ways that are easy to miss because they're invisible. The infrastructure that doesn't get repaired, the research that doesn't get funded, the social programs that get quietly trimmed, the interest rates that stay elevated because the government is always competing with you for borrowed money. Every dollar spent on interest is a dollar that can't become a school, a road, a hospital, or a tax cut. Economists call this the opportunity cost, what we give up by making one choice instead of another. And the opportunity cost is now over $1 trillion a year, every year. Some economists will tell you not to panic. A country is not a household, and the dollar's status as the world's reserve currency gives America unique advantages. Others will tell you this is the defining crisis of our time. They're both not wrong. The honest answer is, No one knows exactly when the weight of this number becomes unsustainable. What we do know is that the window to act, to reform, to grow, to rebalance, narrows a little more each year. Remember that kitchen table at the beginning? Bills spread out, a number that keeps changing before you finish counting? That image is America. Not a broken America, not a doomed one, but one that has been living with a quiet, growing weight, accumulated across decades, across administrations, across moments of genuine crisis and moments of deliberate choice, and has not yet fully reckoned with what carrying it will demand. The core truth is simple enough to tell a friend. America's debt isn't just a big number. It's a claim on the future. And every year we add to it, we are quietly deciding what that future will and won't be able to afford. You now know what most people don't, not because the information was hidden, but because no one made it feel real. It's real. And the next time someone says 39 trillion like it's just a number, you'll know exactly how much a number can weigh.